space tourism. Now that's as long as I can remember, I have been reading about how we're so close to space tourism. I used to have these like science folders that my cousin had given me, I think they were called Quest, and it was just loads of like futuristic stories about science and tech and like trying to envision what the world would be like. And as far as I remember, from then it was always like, oh, in 10 years we may have people like space tourism, and I'm constantly underwhelmed by the lack of options for going to the ISS for my holidays. And constantly wondering if it's actually like a realistic possibility as part of the space race, because that seems to be the thing that a lot of people focus on. It's like, oh, soon we'll be able to send people into space. And I'm like, that's only going to work for as many people as you can convince to do it for the astronomical price it's going to be. It doesn't seem like a huge part of the space experience, or this like the next stage of our expansion as a species. So how much thought do SpaceX and well, yourself as well think or put into whether space tourism is going to be a big part of it, or is it kind of just left to the media almost to speculate about something that's not that relevant to the industry?
That's a great question. And I think that story, we're only really beginning to write it. I do think we are on the cusp of seeing more space tourism, in September of this year. So just in a few months from now, and all civilian crew is going to launch on a Crew Dragon. So SpaceX's Crew Dragon, there's this Inspiration 4 mission where you've got 4 people, no astronauts, entirely private mission in the low Earth orbit. And so that's pretty remarkable. We've never seen anything like that. Another almost all private mission will be launching on Crew Dragon early next year, and they're going to visit the International Space Station. That's the AX-1 mission. And then Blue Origin, probably within a month or two, is going to put people on its New Shepard capsule for the first time. That vehicle, like Virgin Galactic, is suborbital. So there's a big difference between going up for a few minutes of weightlessness, like you get with New Shepard, again, built by Blue Origin, or Virgin Galactic's Spaceship Two. So the suborbital trips are probably going to run $250,000 to $300,000, which is a lot of money. And it's basically like you go up, you have a few minutes of weightlessness, you look down on the Earth and you see the sphere, and it's very cool, but then you come back down. The suborbital, the orbital flights by SpaceX are still like $50 million a person. So that's really expensive. And I don't see a whole lot of change in that over the next decade. This again is where the SpaceX vehicle Starship has the potential to be a game changer, because Starship could launch both suborbital and orbital flights. And so one of the potential use cases for Starship is like almost like a rocket powered airplane, in that it takes off from South Texas and lands in Japan 45 minutes later. And as part of this, you actually go on a suborbital hop. So like you go up above space and come back down. And so you could have like that mission, or like a new Glenn, or excuse me, a New Shepard or Virgin Galactic experience, but also like it's called point-to-point transportation. And what's unique about Starship is it's not like 4 people like are on Virgin Galactic or 6 people on New Shepard. You could literally have like 60 people on Starship, or maybe even more, depending on how they break out the seating, because it's a very large vehicle. And if that were the case, then, you're minting several dozen astronauts on every flight, and point-to-point travel probably would be far less, like, thousands of dollars, not hundreds of thousands of dollars. So again, like Starship is where a lot of our hopes, I think, are being pinned in terms of space tourism.
Do you feel that's more of a gimmick though, or do you think that's like an industry that people will pay like serious attention to?
I don't know. I do think there's lots of interest in like being able to go halfway around the world in an hour. Especially as we get out of the pandemic and the world is increasingly global. And so there's a lot of thought being given to supersonic travel. We're seeing a renaissance in that with companies like Boom Supersonic, but then Starship offers a different approach. There's lots of logistical issues to deal with, and you've got to make the vehicle safe. And those are all serious challenges. But there's definitely some potential there. Yeah.
Do you ever see the government essentially just taken their hands out of like space exploration as an entity? Do you ever see just it being entirely private space exploration, or do you think there'll always be like a European Space Agency, NASA? There'll be like a Chinese program.
I think there will always be national space agencies. The question is, what will they be doing? And they'll be doing the things that aren't economically viable. Like right now, there's no financial incentive to send rovers to Mars, and it's extraordinarily expensive to do that. It's a $2 billion mission or whatever Perseverance is. And so, no one is making a profit back for that. But it's perfect for a government space agency to spend $80 million to stick a small helicopter on Perseverance and then see if it flies, like it did this morning with Ingenuity. So I think the government role is to be out there further and trying to find technologies that maybe, private companies then will commercialize. But the days of NASA building rockets are almost over because the private sector does it so much better.
Now, I'm keen to how detailed can you go on that new style of engineering you were talking about in Texas, where they're like using like rolls of sheet metal? Like how can you explain to me like what's revolutionary about that, and like what's so special about it?
So there's two basic methods of design and engineering. There's linear and iterative, and by and large, the space industry has operated through linear design. So that means that you'll spend a while figuring out, okay, this is the kind of rocket or spacecraft we want, and then sort of spending years designing the hell out of that vehicle to make it look or operate the way you want it, and then you sort of start to do some subsystem tests. And then you build the different components and then you assemble them. And then 10 years later, you've got this enormously expensive vehicle. You've built one of them and you're going to fly it. And you better hope it works, because if it fails, you've got to spend 2 more years building the next one. The good thing about that design method is that oftentimes the first time out, it does work, because you spent so long, as I say, engineering it to death and figuring out all the failure modes. And there could be, theoretically, 100 failure modes, but only 1 or 2 of them will actually get you in flight. So what SpaceX has done is they've said, okay, it's all right to fail when we're developing these vehicles. That's okay, because it's going to allow us to go much faster. And so, they'll do some engineering design and analysis, but very early in the process, they'll start building. And they'll once they get a prototype ready, they'll go fly it, and the thing will fail. But they'll get a lot of data and they'll understand why it failed. And then they'll build the next one better. And then they'll get data from that. And maybe they'll go higher, or maybe they'll almost land, or maybe they'll do this. And they'll learn about, okay, well, this was the problem there, so we can make it better. And so it's instead of spending years and years doing this theoretical work, they're getting practical experience data, like real world data from the vehicle. And that just allows you to go much faster, because you plow your learnings into new vehicles. And the problem is, for NASA, for a traditional government contractor, it's bad if stockholders see you fail, right? It looks bad. Congress doesn't like to see NASA fail. But Elon Musk very early on said failure is an option at SpaceX, and he's lived up to that.
Yeah, I think he said that at the minute when they're doing a lot of the testing, is that they're expecting it to crash. If it doesn't, they're incredibly happy. They're building it. They're essentially building it with the idea that it will crash, which seems insane. It's like you don't build a car with the idea it's going to blow up halfway around the track. Like,
yeah, for sure.
So for you, what's like the most? Do you have like a fact about SpaceX that is like something that just you go, no, that can't be true, or you tell people and they're like, what, or like, what's your like most interesting or shocking fact about the company?
Sure. So since 2005, NASA's been developing the Orion spacecraft. I don't know if you've heard of it, but this is the capsule that will go on top of the Space Launch System rocket and will carry 4 astronauts out to the moon and back. And so it's a little bigger than the Apollo capsules in the 1960s, but same kind of design, same kind of purpose, going to the moon and back and landing in the ocean. And it's modernized. But NASA has spent 16 years developing the vehicle and more than $20 billion. And it's a boilerplate version. The vehicle did one flight in 2014, and it has not flown yet. Again, it may fly next year, and it might fly humans in maybe 3 years. So 16 years and more than $20 billion. So I'll go back to 2005 and what SpaceX has accomplished since 2005 for less money from all sources than NASA has spent on Orion. They've launched 120 rockets, right? They've developed the Falcon 1, Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy, and they're working on Starship. They've delivered more than 20 supply missions to the International Space Station. They've launched 2 crews and are about to launch a 3rd crew to the space station this week. They have more satellites in orbit than any company or country in the world with the Starlink constellation. They've done all of this groundbreaking work in reuse and reflight. And so that is the promise of commercial space versus the traditional way that the government and its contractors have operated. So SpaceX is just this absolute revolution in terms of what the private sector can do in an ideal situation. And again, a lot of that is due to sort of the vision and the action of Elon Musk.
You almost forget about the Starlink program as well. How close to completion are they with that?
They're still far away. I mean, they want to eventually put thousands or tens of thousands of satellites, and they have about 1,400 on orbit right now. But they've opened up a beta, and I think by the end of the year, almost everyone in North America will be able to use the service. So it's a lot closer, I think, than people realize.
That's really wild. Like anytime you talk about one of Elon Musk's projects, it really does sound like a Bond villain in the making.
Yeah, for sure. Fortunately, I'm genuinely convinced he wants to help the world. Like, he gets painted as a villain, and I mean, he can be a not nice person, right? For sure. So, as I say, you got to take the good with the bad.
I couldn't agree more. So thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, follow me on Twitter, or sign up to our mailing list. Thanks a lot to our sponsor, ExpressVPN, the #1 most trusted VPN. Get lightning fast connectivity with servers in 160 locations across 94 countries. Keep your browsing privacy safe with ExpressVPN and get a 35% discount on 12 months of ExpressVPN when you follow the link in the description below. Don't forget my book is now out and available to order on Amazon and on bookshop.org. That's Brexit, the Establishment Civil War. And most importantly, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.